But this is why this is not going to change. This is not going to happen. The church is not going to say, all right, now we're going to start ordaining women to the priesthood. That would cause an immediate schism in the church, which would be the worst thing that could happen. We don't want that. There are people, I grant this, including some Catholic people, including some Catholic bishops, quite frankly, who are continuing to agitate in favor of women in the priesthood. It's just not going to happen. So if you ever see a group of people sort of hiving off and are starting to ordain women, then that'll be your first clue that they've left the Catholic Church. Even maybe it could get to the point, who knows, I hope it doesn't, I pray that it doesn't, where maybe even the majority of people in the Catholic Church say, yeah, let's do this, then they would in effect be leaving the Catholic Church. They would be going into schism and heresy. So here is what Pope John Paul II said on this topic. The document is called Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, and he issued this in 1994. And here it is. Priestly ordination, which hands on the office entrusted by Christ to his apostles of teaching, sanctifying, and governing the faithful, has in the Catholic Church from the beginning always been reserved to men alone. This tradition has always been faithfully maintained by the Oriental churches, and that's referring to the Eastern churches, such as not only the Eastern rites of the Catholic Church, but also the Eastern Orthodox churches who are living in separation from the Catholic Church. He says, when the question of the ordination of women arose in the Anglican Communion, Pope Paul VI, out of fidelity to his office of safeguarding the apostolic tradition, and also with a view to removing a new obstacle placed in the way of Christian unity, reminded Anglicans of the position of the Catholic Church. Quote, she holds that it is not admissible to ordain women to the priesthood for very fundamental reasons. These reasons include the example recorded in the sacred scriptures of Christ choosing his apostles only from among men, the constant practice of the Church, which has imitated Christ in choosing only men, and her living teaching authority, which has consistently held that the exclusion of women from the priesthood is in accordance with God's plan for his church. Now, that's a quote from Pope Paul VI. John Paul II continues, but since the question has also become the subject of debate among theologians and in certain Catholic circles, Paul VI directed the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to set forth and expound the teaching of the Church on this matter. This was done through the declaration Inter Insignores, which the Supreme Pontiff approved in order to be published. The declaration recalls and explains the fundamental reasons for this teaching, reasons expounded by Paul VI, and concludes that the Church, quote, does not consider herself authorized to admit women to priestly ordination, end of quote. To these fundamental reasons, the document adds other theological reasons which illustrate the appropriateness of the divine provision, and it also shows clearly that Christ's way of acting did not proceed from sociological or cultural motives peculiar to his time. And I'm going to pause there. What Pope John Paul II is emphasizing here is that over against the argument that some people raise that Jesus, well, he only did that because it was a patriarchal society, or he only did that because it would have created all kinds of problems and people would have gotten angry, so he did it the way the culture dictated it should be done, the way the local customs of, and he's saying nonsense. Jesus broke all kinds of customs. Jesus defied all sorts of social mores, everything from picking wheat on the Sabbath to not following the ceremonial washings. The Jews got very uptight about that. Allowing women to be, dining with him like the woman who washed his feet with her tears and dried them with her hair, St. Mary Magdalene. And there are many other examples where Jesus completely ignored and defied some of the time-honored traditions of his day. So that's what Pope Paul VI said, and that's what Pope John Paul II is saying, that this has nothing to do with these cultural motivations. So he continues, as Paul VI later said, the real reason is that in giving the Church her fundamental constitution, her theological anthropology, thereafter always followed by the Church's tradition, Christ established things in this way. The apostolic letter, in the apostolic letter, Mulieris Dignitatem, and that's Pope John Paul II's letter on the dignity of women, he says, I myself wrote in this regard, quote, in calling only men as apostles, Christ acted in a completely free and sovereign manner. In doing so, he exercised the same freedom with which in all his behavior he emphasized the dignity and the vocation of women, without conforming to the prevailing customs and to the traditions sanctioned by the legislation of the time. In fact, the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles attest that this call was made in accordance with God's eternal plan. Christ chose those whom he willed, and he gives Bible verses to back up each of these statements. That one is from Mark chapter 3 and also John chapter 6. So Christ chose those whom he willed, and he did so in union with the Father through the Holy Spirit, after having spent the night in prayer. Therefore, in granting admission to the ministerial priesthood, the Church has always acknowledged as a perennial norm her Lord's way of acting in choosing the 12 men whom he made the foundation of his Church. These men did not, in fact, receive only a function which could thereafter be exercised by any member of the Church. Rather, they were specifically and intimately associated in the mission of the incarnate Word himself. The apostles did the same thing when they chose fellow workers who would succeed them in their ministry. Also included in this choice were those who, throughout the time of the Church, would carry on the apostles' mission of representing Christ, the Lord and Redeemer. Furthermore, the fact that the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God and Mother of the Church, received neither the mission proper to the apostles nor the ministerial priesthood clearly shows that the non-admission of women to priestly ordination cannot mean that women are of a lesser dignity, nor can it be construed as discrimination against them. Rather, it is to be seen as the faithful observance of a plan to be ascribed to the wisdom of the Lord of the universe. The presence and the role of women in the life and mission of the Church, although not linked to the ministerial priesthood, remain absolutely necessary and irreplaceable. As the Declaration Inter Insigniores points out, the Church desires that Christian women should become fully aware of the greatness of their mission. Today their role is of capital importance both for the renewal and humanization of society and for the rediscovery by believers of the true face of the Church. Now, he's just about over. He's just about done. So let me read you the last couple bits. The New Testament and the whole history of the Church give ample evidence of the presence in the Church of women, true disciples, witnesses to Christ, in the family and in society, as well as in total consecration to the service of God and of the gospel. By defending the dignity of women and their vocation, the Church has shown honor and gratitude for those women who, faithful to the gospel, have shared in every age in the apostolic mission of the whole people of God. They are the holy martyrs, virgins, and mothers of families who bravely bore witness to their faith and passed on the Church's faith and tradition by bringing up their children in the spirit of the gospel. Moreover, it is to the holiness of the faithful that the hierarchical structure of the Church is totally ordered. For this reason, the Declaration Inter Insigniores recalls, the only better gift which can and must be desired is love. The greatest in the kingdom of heaven is not the ministers, but the saints. Although the teaching that priestly ordination is to be reserved to men alone has been preserved by the constant and universal tradition of the Church and firmly taught by the magisterium in its more recent documents, at the present time, in some places, it is nonetheless considered still open to debate, or the Church's judgment that women are not to be admitted to ordination is considered to have merely a disciplinary force. Now here's the money quote. Ready? Wherefore, in order that all doubt may be removed regarding a matter of great importance, a matter which pertains to the Church's divine constitution itself, in virtue of my ministry of confirming the brethren, I declare that the Church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women, and that this judgment is to be definitively held by all the Church's faithful. And then he gives his blessing, and that's the end of it. So you can see it's rather brief. And he doesn't give an exhaustive account of why the Church reserves holy orders to men alone, but he at least gives the salient points, including this is how it was revealed by Christ himself. Now, there are other aspects of this that we could take up if that's something of interest to any of you, but just be aware that this is a matter, it's closed, it's case closed, can't be done, can't be changed. The Church can't say that from now on 2 + 2 = 5. The Church doesn't have that power to change something that's actually already defined. And if you have any other questions on it, please feel free to call 888-914-9149.